So welcome to Dying to Tell You the Caring Perspective. Today I have with me one of my best friends in the world, Mr. Garrett Price.
Hey.
Welcome, Garrett.
Hey, Cody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. The Caring Perspective is like this offshoot from the normal podcast, and it really is like an excuse for me to hang out and talk with my friends. It's not really, but it's a side effect, I guess. 2004 was when we met. So a little over 20 years. 21 years, I guess. It'll be
Our
21.
relationship can drink.
21 in so we knew each other then, and I think we've both gone through lots of stuff in our lives together, and Garrett has been there for me and I've been there for him, and it's a special friendship for sure. You became a chaplain before I did, so you say something now.
Okay. Well, my son died, and when that happened, I started to go through a deconstruction process, and what I was doing, and in the setting that I was in didn't seem to fit anymore. And since I didn't, a undergraduate degree in biblical studies doesn't help you do a whole lot in the world. I struggled. I struggled to find another career path, and but did really like the idea of chaplaincy, especially the idea of just kind of taking the staples of theology that I still hold dear, just pastoral care, caring for people where they are, and so that's what I jumped into. Was that, and started along that path and started to do a master's degree, and and I think we had kind of, our paths kind of went in that direction together for a while.
Yeah. How long did you work as a chaplain?
I think about 10 years altogether. In the hospital first, doing the CPE stuff, and then got into hospice chaplaincy after that, and spent most of my time as a chaplain in the hospice setting is where I worked.
And now you are a therapist.
Yep. Well, I'm a licensed professional counselor working here in the state of Idaho, and have my own little private practice where I specialize in trauma, grief, loss, and couples therapy, and all sorts of fun stuff that I really enjoy.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Okay.
So this is an opportunity for people to hear a story from somebody who has worked with people at the end of their life, and kind of what you took away from that encounter. So tell me a story, Garrett.
Yeah. So when I first got in the chaplaincy, I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Same.
And I remember them going you seem qualified, here, do this job. And so I bought I remember how excited I was, because it was the first time I was making like an hourly wage that seemed decently significant. And I think it was $16 an hour. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so I bought a motorcycle, and I became like this motorcycle chaplain, and I worked in the rural population of Idaho. So I would ride this motorcycle. I would spend most of my day riding my motorcycle through the farmland of Idaho to these little tiny towns, just kind of all over the place. And And one of those cities is a city called Emmett, which is not too far out of Boise, where I live now. So I in those days, it was such a weird phenomenon because I always felt like I had to like explain to others what a chaplain does while I was trying to figure out what a chaplain does.
Yes.
And so I would oftentimes go in and I was just told to call all these patients. They would come in, I'd call them, and eventually I kind of came to like this shtick of what I would like say, and it was something to the effect of because most people go like, we have our own minister, we have our own pastor, and I would say like, that's great. Really what I'm here to do is to listen deeply to you, which is the closest to the way I could name it. I want to be a place where you can say the things that maybe can't be said in other places, safe enough to say those things. And taking that approach got me into a lot of places. And I got really good at, especially like grumpy old men, because we had a lot of them in Idaho. That became kind of my specialty. So I became this guy that would, like whenever there was a problemed old man, he eventually found his way onto my caseload. And I would spend a lot of time there, trying to, especially, we had a lot of sexually inappropriate grumpy old men. So I would spend a lot of time like,
we get our share of those in the hospital.
Yeah, right, totally. And so I spent a lot of time kind of going at the same time as the nurse, so I could kind of be there and like tell this guy to be appropriate and
knock it off,
and be like, dude, how many times, like, those are your hands, they belong to you, not to her, so you can't touch her with those hands. And so like I've been struggling on which one of these stories to tell you, but I think there's two of them that maybe are a little shorter, but so you let me know. But so the first one, I remember showing up to this guy's house, and I'll just call him Doug for the sake of this conversation. And when I first met Doug, he was congestive heart failure was what he was on our services for. He lived alone. He lived in this tiny little trailer house that smelt horrible, was pretty gross to go into. Just meaning like, the longer he lived alone with that disease process, he just wasn't able to like keep up the house. And he loved dogs and he loved cats. So he had a cat and a dog. So and he needed the house to be as hot as possible. So even like in the summer times, it's 100 degrees outside. He wanted it just hot in there because it was just always cold. So to go into his place was to kind of be accosted by all these smells, all these sounds, all these animals, and just heat. You just had to be in there.
Everything
hot.
Just marinating
oh,
in there.
Man, it
so
was
good.
It was such an experience. And if you know walking in, what it's like to walk into just homes like that, he carried a lot of shame about it, and I wanted to like be able to not carry judgment into it, which at times was difficult, but it was interesting to see how he just like, when he would be ashamed and then I would work to be okay in that space, that built a type of connection between the two of us, and to where he could actually trust that I could be okay in that space. And then he kind of got more willing to have me there. And Doug was just an incredibly interesting guy. He would tell me all sorts of stories that I don't know if they're true or not, but to this day, they kind of break my brain a little bit. Like he would tell me, so he reported that he was part of the CIA and worked with the CIA back in like the time where CIA was doing some of like these studies on his telepathy reel and all these kinds of things. And he reported that like they had technologies back then that if they could get, like, he would take my arm and like he would like say, if I could get just like this much of your skin, and he would just like pull on my skin a little bit. If I could get that much skin, I could set up a device where I could listen to your life, like anywhere you went. I could set up and like a system that could hear you wherever you go. So if I could take that skin, I could track you, I could listen to you, I could tell you, yeah. And I never like, so everybody else that went in there would always listen to these stories and be like, Doug, that's not true. Doug, that's not true. It's just not a true story. And I would sit there and just get fascinated. I'd be like, Doug, tell me more. I just like, really, what was that like? And just, it was like listening to Tom Clancy novel, listening to him. Like, I had no idea if this is fiction or not, but it was just deeply intriguing. And I think largely, like, I guess even today, I try not to get caught up in the true or not in those stories. Because the longer I sat there and listened to him, the more I got to know Doug. And the more he would get into these stories of, he'd be talking through all these things and then instantly turn towards this estranged daughter that he never got to spend time with. And he would talk about her, and he'd become emotional. And then the two of us should just sit there. And I don't know, it was just so human, so close to see him struggle through his life and these moments like that. And so I would spend like I think Tuesdays with Doug, and I'd spend more time than I should. I would spend, I was supposed to be there for 45 minutes, to an hour, and I'd end up spending an hour and a half, 2 hours with Doug. And he would do things for me, like he would learn that I enjoy coffee, so we'd always have coffee there for me, and it was horrible. But I would sit and I would drink his coffee, and
hot coffee in that
hot
house.
Coffee, hot house, all the smells. And so the way hospice goes, you're supposed to 6 months or less, but traditionally when I was working hospice, I think I got to spend about 2 years with Doug.
Oh, wow.
Hearing all of his stories and getting to know, and what was really cool was like his daughter that he spoke about. I was able to kind of wonder with him if he'd be willing to reach out to her if we could find her, and we were able to kind of find Doug's, and with the help of a social worker, we reached out to her, and she was hesitant to kind of come and spend time with him, and we never pressured, and just kind of kept telling Doug like kind of where we're at, and they started a correspondence via email, and then eventually, in the last couple of weeks of his life, she did like they did some Skype meetings with each other, and back then we used, I forget the author's name, but the 4 things that matter most.
Bioc. Ira Bioc.
Thank you. Bioc. That became like, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, that kind of was my initial kind of inroad into all of it. So I would just talk about those 4 things quite a bit with people, as kind of a curriculum for like this spiritual, emotional end of life process. And Doug, like, he'd always kind of like, when I'd bring up those questions, like, anybody you need to say thank you to, or anybody you need to, I guess I should say the 4 things, right? So they're, I forgive you, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. And together, at least the way I used to say it, and together those make a good goodbye.
Yeah.
And just talk about that with, so I talked to Doug about that with his life, like doing it towards himself and doing it towards others, and to do it towards situations. And over the years, we'd talk about that a lot. And he in fact would even like go like, so which one are we talking about today, Garrett? And I would just we just jump into it, and then like organically I got to be there on a Zoom call with his daughter where he said those things to his daughter. Yeah, and he died a couple weeks after that. She was really hoping to like get her out there, but we just couldn't quite make it happen for the two of them. At the end of life, he would he couldn't stay in his house anymore, which was hard for him, and he went over to a local nursing home, and he was at the end of that, though he had made really good relationships with a nurse that was there, and we were all kind of there when he died, and just to he was in pain for like the last 2 weeks, and at the very end of life, for him just to go like enough, and to kind of be there and to hear him just say thank you to us was a hell of a thing. Yeah, that was Doug.
Thanks for sharing the story. Several things came up for me as you were telling that story. One is, I'm going to start kind of where you started, which was like trying to tell people what a chaplain does. I still have a hard time doing it, and it's kind of audience based, depending what I say, depends on the audience, but the function of a chaplain is, to me, and I hope to all chaplains, maybe not, but to me is so much different than what a pastor does, right? Like, I understand that there's a lot of good pastors out there who do great pastoral care, and there's power in having somebody that is not intimately connected, somebody that can receive and bear witness to what's happening and receive whatever you need to tell them, without all the baggage that comes along with knowing somebody for so long. And so yeah, I think it's really powerful. I think it might be useful for people to hear that there is some benefit in having somebody that is not all wrapped up in your story be able to bear witness to what's happening. The other thing that came up that I kind of wanted to reflect on with you a little bit is something that you taught me, and you're always the one who's given me stuff to read, and the idea, as you were talking about going into Doug's house and just trying to be open, accepting what's coming, trying not to have the judgment about his living conditions, or even about the kind of bullshit stories that he's telling you. Maybe they're bullshit, we don't know. Is the idea of it's Carl Rogers' unconditional positive regard, all right? Like this.
Oh, yeah.
That's really what I mean when I say non-anxious presence. It's this idea of doing my best to walk into a room with an attitude of acceptance and openness, and unconditionally having positive regard for this person. Like, just if I have to have an assumption, the assumption is they're great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a huge amount of power in showing up for somebody in that way. And that, again, is something that a lot of people can't do when you know them. They know they know you, and they have a lot of, even the best pastors or family members or whatever, have these preconceived notions, biases, assumptions, whatever that they walk in with, and um, yeah, I learned that from you.
No,
Now I'm gonna cry. Um,
I'll probably join you.
Anybody else that has given that to me in the way that you have, I've I've never felt judged, even when I do stupid shit, um, and so it means a lot to me, and I'm sure it meant a lot to your patients. So thanks.
Yeah.
It's made me a better chaplain. It's made me a better person. So appreciate you.
Buddy, that's very kind. Thank you. It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right. Like, I mean, that idea of non-judgmental acceptance um, has been a staple still of what I do in
Yeah.
therapy today. And I do think it's rare to be met without an agenda.
Yeah.
And that was another thing that I like. I cherish as kind of sacred from Carlos Rogers is like if it matters, it will come up.
Yeah.
There's no need to force it. Like if it matters, it'll show up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So powerful. I mean, I think, well, if people were to see my visits as a chaplain, I think a lot of them would be like, well, why didn't you offer to pray with them, or why didn't you talk to them about this, or why didn't you talk to them about that? And that's always been my tact with visiting with people, is they'll tell me what they want me to know, and they'll bring it up if it's important. They know who I am.
yeah,
I don't feel the need to force anything. So yeah, it's been really powerful for me.
yeah. Yeah, the only agenda I used to say that I would carry into a room with me is if the patient could get a sense that I am authentically caring for them, and if they could get that sense from me that I was there authentically caring for them, that if there was a need, that it would present itself, it would show up. If there was an issue, that would also kind of show up, and I think at times that's helped me also to kind of, I could see the need but not push on it too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think of the art of caring is just that, an art.
I think that's part of why I like my job so much, is because there's a lot of creativity to it. And we've talked about like the art of getting into the room, art of convincing people that I'm not there to proselytize, or that maybe there is something I can do for them. It's fun.
The art of being willing and able to hear hard things. I think that was a thing that I heard a lot. In fact, like I could say this to you, and I could see that you weren't overwhelmed by it.
Right.
That I could be in the room and hear that thing and go like, yeah, I can open up to that with you. I can sit in not knowing with you. I could sit in the scariness of this with you. wherever those things are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
all
remember
go ahead.
my first, I'm sure I've told you the story, but my first CPE supervisor was, yeah, CPE. But I was presenting this case, and I was like, the person started to cry, and I looked around the room and got him tissues, and I'm presenting my case, and then at the end of it, my supervisor goes, "Why'd you get tissues?" And I was like, "Because they were crying," and he was like, "Did you need them to stop crying? Did that make you upset?" And he was just like, if they need tissues, they'll ask for tissues. Your job is to be there and witness what's happening, and show them that you can be there with them, and that the emotions and the experience they're having is not too much for you. So that's kind of been my mantra, is don't get the tissues, meaning, hey, just be there. It's okay.
Truly. That is
Yeah.
so true. Yeah, like I think a lot about I tell a lot of my clients now that my job is not to help you feel good, but to be good at feeling.
Mm.
And I think that line's kind of perfectly there. Like if I'm the person there and I can, when the person moves into sadness, instead of trying to move them out of their sadness, can I move in to that with them to a place where it deepens their sadness, to where they can get good at feeling that can be approachable. It doesn't have to be overwhelming or scaring or destroying, that they can move into that. And maybe also they could see that has its own gifting as they sit with it, that the sadness is data, it's information that's helpful, and it points you at things that are worth experiencing. So yeah, it's a very artful thing to do.
Yeah. It's challenging, but so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Doug, specifically, what did you take away from that that story, that set of encounters?
Well, I think probably the first thing that I would point to is the value of knowing every life. My automatic reactions to a house like that, and to smells like this, and to experiences like this, or even stories that he might be telling me initially, like it's so easy to maybe get caught in any of those things and miss out on seeing a life worth knowing. And that was something I think I got kind of proven to myself over and over again as I did chaplaincy work in the hospice setting, was that every life was of value, was worth knowing. And because of pain, trauma, lives lived, I think people have learned to protect that.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of do this kind of gatekeeping on, are you able, can you actually kind of come into that space with me? And and that's part of the art of this, is being able, I think, to go in and to kind of demonstrate that, like, yeah, like I am willing to go there with you, and that's a gift to patients as well, because it does mirror back to them their value. I think a lot about like attachment styles, is attachment psychology, but inside of that, like it's relationships that heal, right? And as I go in to those places, like if I get caught in my judgments, I might not actually see a person of value enough to make a relationship with. And if I can stay out of those judgments and move into that place, that's kind of where the gift of this work is for me and for the person I'm sitting with.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be one. Um, I think what's hard in that is that you do open yourself up to actually now caring for this person.
Yeah.
And, that's like, seeing Doug is probably, God, like, that was probably 15-ish years ago. And he still is kind of with me
Mm-hmm.
in ways. I can still like think about him and get tearful. And I think people can see that as a cost to kind of going in there, but I don't know. It goes back to just what we're saying, that like there's a bittersweetness to this work, and it that can be itself kind of supportive as you go through the loss. There's ways of continuing relationship with these people that I carry him in my life. In fact, like this is probably ethically irresponsible, but Doug gave me this.
Oh.
And
move it closer to your face. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I don't know, right there.
Yeah,
Doug gave me this. It's a. It's not the coolest thing in the world,
but it's pretty cool.
But it is pretty cool, and I don't know, like he gave it to me. It's so cliche, but he thought I was wise like an owl, so he wanted to give this to me. He gave it to me right before he moved out of his place, and I still have it. But like, in order to carry this with me, I also carried the sadness of the loss of Doug with me, but it's worth it, because that's how I get. There is no blessing without the pain. Just those things don't exist without each other.
Yeah. Well, just and this is, well, as you were talking about earlier with your clients now, being able to feel well or be good at feeling, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've talked about this a lot too, but the resistance to unpleasant emotion gets us into a lot of trouble. But if we can make friends with the sadness, if we can be there and have that sadness and feel it for what it is, and realize that there's no threat to me if I'm feeling sad, and there's no problem with feeling sad, then eventually I feel like oftentimes you can kind of transform that into something else that's useful, right? I mean, like you with Doug, right? You feel that sadness, but you also you carry all that other stuff along with it.
Yeah.
Which, that's beautiful, and I guess not everybody can do it, but I think that's a powerful lesson too. That there's it's an unpopular opinion these days, but it's okay to have unpleasant emotions, and they can be useful, and they can tell us about ourselves, and we can work with them. We can have them. We can work with them, and so it's very powerful. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, well, Doug's, truly, thanks, Doug. Yeah, I think I think it's a bit redundant, but just to say, like, instead of judging what's coming up, that was a lesson from Doug, I think. Instead of judging what's coming up, or sitting at it from a place of true or untrue, maybe there's a different way to kind of listen, which is just to kind of listen into that, and to, with this attitude of, I wonder what will come next. I wonder what will come after this.
Yeah. And or even I wonder why this is coming up.
Exactly.
Why is he telling me this?
That's it. just at that place of, instead of judging, just wondering with it. I think that was a huge gift from him. And I think the last piece, like, right after I think it was right during my time with Doug, I learned about the Anamkara tradition of the soul friend, which became the language that I started to use to introduce myself, is that I just want to be a friend to your soul. And then that's the way I would talk about myself. And that approach helped me kind of get into more spaces and meet more people. And that for me, like, if I can just do that, if I can listen deeply, become a friend to that person's soul, then, and I don't hold that too literally. I don't really know how to kind of like think about that now, but what's the depth of them, the deepness of them? If I can listen into that clearly, then I can be a mirror for this person into their own value. And that was a gift Doug gave me also.
Yeah. That unconditional positive regard, the acceptance, the being seen, being known. It's all anybody wants, and it's not all anybody wants, but it's something that everybody wants, right? And maybe it is all we really want. That everything we do is in service of getting that. Yeah. Well, I also, something else that kind of came up as you were talking. It's like, this guy, you went and saw him. Who knows how many times, but a lot. Several times. And I think, when I'm going to see a patient, I don't see patients all that often, that many times. But, I want there to be some progress. I want there to be something to the work that we're doing. And I put a lot of pressure on each visit. And the reality is that sometimes nothing happens, right? I just show up and, they don't want to participate in that way. Like, I'm not having it. We're not going to do that anymore.
Not going to go there. Yep.
And that's got to be okay too. Not every patient is going to benefit greatly from me. And which I know is a shock to most people. But, and yeah, not everybody's going to die in some beatific way. Not everybody's going to come to like some grand closure in their life. That's just not the way it works. And so that is another thing that has been, difficult for me to kind of come to grips with, is I can't fix everything. I can't even do something good for every person, and like, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm not for everyone. And, so that has to be okay too. And sometimes I walk into the room and I don't get a step in, and I get told to leave, and that's, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. I think, a healthy dose of trust is a necessity for longevity in this work. That, in the way that I've always tried to name that, there's a way that even this goes well.
Yeah.
And just leaning into that piece of it.
All right, man. We did it.
Yay.
Hey, do you, I don't know. Everybody else that's been on is like, has a website or a podcast or something they want to plug. Do you want new clients?
Well, yeah. If you find yourself in Boise, Idaho, and in need of a therapist, please look me up. Trailhead Counseling and Grief Therapy. That's me. And just 208trailhead.com is the website that supports that. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm not
we'll
cool
put
enough
it in
to
the
have
show notes.
Podcast, but maybe one day.
Yeah. Maybe. All right. Well, Garrett, I love you with all my heart.
No, buddy. And I you, my friend. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you to Garrett for sharing your story and reflection with us on the podcast. Thank you most of all for being a true friend, accepting me for who I am, and always encouraging me to learn and grow as a professional and as a person. You can find more about Garrett and his work as a therapist at 208trailhead.com. Remember, you can watch all episodes of Dying to Tell You, The Caring Perspective on YouTube, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have more guests coming each week with thoughtful stories of hope and learning at the end of life. Thanks again for listening. This is Dying to Tell You, The Caring Perspective.